do you think that would be humans being in their nature?
No, and see, that's the thing. We humans, see, this kind of goes back to what is, like, for example, what is the purpose of religion, right? So I think there's universally this fundamental recognition, whether it's not always vocalized or not, that something's wrong with the world, something's wrong with the way we exist. You know, what are we here to do? What's the meaning of life? Here we are on this giant rock, flying through space at thousands of miles an hour, circling this giant fireball. Like, how did this happen? Why are we here? Like, is this all this is? We're born, we make money, we spend it, and then we die? Like, is there no meaning to existence? And so people have wrestled with, well, why are we here? What are we here to do? Are we here to do anything? And I think that what religion attempts to do is say, okay, well, there is a purpose to your life. Here's what that purpose is. Here's what you can do to get in tune with that purpose. And if you do, you'll live a happy, harmonious life. Now, I can only speak to the Christian faith. I can't speak to the other ones. But what the Christian faith does is it solves a problem in saying, okay, well, here's the purpose for your life. Here's what you are meant to do. Here's the Bible. It explains that. And as we line ourselves up with that path and we follow it, we start to see the fruit and the benefits from that.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Kachua. So pretty much, since we don't have like all that, would you agree? Since we don't have all the information of why we're here, and all these questions that we might never find out, we use religion as in like, this is better. At least we have some type of belief. This is better than not knowing. Would you consider that?
Yeah. Well, for example, it's good. I would say that it's better to have some kind of structure there, because it's good to have a structure where people get together maybe once a week. They talk about what they can do to be better people. They have guidelines that keep them from going off the rails and doing evil things. But ultimately, you've got to have God here. Ultimately, that it's a personal relationship here, and God either works in your heart or he doesn't. So one of the interesting things about Jesus is he was in conflict with the religious figures of his time. He came in and he argued with the scribes and the Pharisees. These are basically the religious priests back in the day. And he would call them, vipers and snakes. And, he was not in line with what the church believed, the Jewish church back then. And Jesus came and he offered like this very simple fulfillment of the law. That ultimately you're rather than subscribing to all these rules and living by the law and having the weight of this law in your hands, like, I got to do this, I got to do that, I can't do this, can't do that. Your heart changes to where you naturally obey the law on your own. Just a small example, right? You probably don't have the desire to go out and commit arson, right? Burn down houses, right? So it's not in your nature to do that.
Okay, so but I don't think it's in anyone's nature to do that. I think that there's variables.
Talk to arsonists, and they, there's people, pyromaniacs, obsessed with fire. They can't stop thinking about that.
But wouldn't that also be based on like where you grew up? The social construct of it is very key component. Also, where you grew up, all those things make very key component. Let's say, like, for example, you would have grew up in a different home. You think you would have been different?
Well, yeah. Now, there's no denying, for example, we are a lot of times programmed by our culture.
Exactly.
And a lot of times, I'm not one of those people that always thinks that culture is a healthy thing. I think there's some cultures that are better than others, definitely. But this is also something that, and I think sometimes a lot of Christians don't talk about, is, do you believe what you believe because it's sincere and it's coming from within? Or do you believe it because you live in a culture or you live in a household that says this is how things are, and, live by the Bible because that's just all you've ever known?
And that's a key component. So, for example, Julio, did you grow up in a religious home?
Kinda. So it's like, for me it was different because like I'm Mexican, so the majority of the country's like Catholic. Catholic. So growing up, I always saw like the Virgin Mary. Like the Virgin Mary is very important figure in like Catholicism. Also, all kinds of ways to represent that, whether it be like through the cross that you wear,
Sure.
or having an image of some saint in your pocket, and things like that, which I'm pretty sure Christians don't do any of that, right?
Well, as far as a lot of and this could be a long conversation. Catholics tend to do things a lot different than I think Christians do. Yeah, and there's point of contentions on many fronts with Catholics. But like, for example, I wouldn't subscribe to the idea of all this imagery. Not a huge fan of all the stained glass and the little idols, and even sometimes I used to know guys that wear these huge crucifixes, and
So Christians do that, but the reason I was asking him, and that's a great point, is you grew up in a more Catholic home, you in a Christian home. I think we grew up, as in me and my brother, grew up in a more Christian orientated home. My key component is, did you like, for example, for you, because I'm not religious, or I don't subscribe to that thought. I don't know about you, Julio. Do you?
To Catholicism,
or to any?
My whole thing, maybe even like now, I would say I don't follow like a religion, so I wouldn't say, like, I'll say like I was raised Catholic, like I don't mind like bringing up Catholicism, like I don't think I'm someone who would mind, but I did go through all the like First Communion.
Sure.
But I didn't go to church like really often. So it was never like a consistent thing. Like my mom maybe would pray, but she wouldn't have like a Bible or something,
Right.
like little things like that. So as I got older and I just like questioned more often, saw like that there was other religions.
Sure.
I was just kind of like, oh, well, at the end of the day, they're all kind of aiming towards one of the same things, and that's kind of like the belief in a higher power. So that's what I started looking into. Just no specific God or anything, just the fact that there might be something above us all. And once I got to that point, I just kind of started looking more into philosophy and more in science. So through those things, there was kind of like other things that made me think that just excluded a higher power, like had nothing to do with a higher power. I just started questioning the fabric of like reality. So it was more philosophical like that. I started questioning like science and math. Like I started questioning everything to a point where the need for a higher power or there being a higher power still didn't make a difference to me. So if there was a God, it wouldn't matter to me, because I'm still questioning where that God came from. Why is it this way? Why do these laws apply to us? So I got to a point where I thought everything was like relative. That's like where I'm at. Everything's relative. So just if like one of the things I was going to ask you was if you believed in evolution. Like I know you brought up physics and like science before, so I'm pretty sure you'll say yes. But I wasn't going to get to the physical evolution. So where I'm at now is I think we're still evolving, but we're evolving mentally, because you brought up the fact that animals behave within their nature, right? So I was wondering, before there was like Christianity, like before any of that, humans have been around for a while. So when we were in those times, we were in our nature, and we still kind of ended up doing the same thing. It's just I felt like we evolved mentally. So before we would have gods, but they would be the sun, the moon, the rain.
Because we didn't have knowledge.
Exactly, yeah. So our ideology evolved. So now, instead of thinking about those gods, now we know, oh, that's just like a rock in the sky. But we're still questioning, and then we go, okay, maybe there is a higher power, but he's like us. And then, no, he's not like us, but he sent someone that represents us, for example, Jesus, right? And then that's only like a certain section of the world. You go through other religions, and I'm not like, I wouldn't say I'm well versed in other religions, but they all kind of have the same thing where it's a person kind of guiding them and letting them know that there's something higher than them. But now, like, I go back to the whole mental evolution. Like, I'm pretty sure like atheism's on the rise, right? Atheism is a consistently growing thing
in certain areas of the world. Yeah, there's certain areas are becoming more religious. In Western societies, you see an increase in atheism.
Why do you think that?
A lot of it, I think, has to do with the education system.
Is that positive or negative?
I think it's a negative. I mean, but obviously, I mean,
I hate the school system regardless. So
so I mean, I was a Sunday school teacher for a number of years, and I would go to teaching small kids, and we'd go to these conferences, and one of the things they talked about is how a lot of kids, once they leave the church, go to college, by the time they're out of college, they've embraced atheism or agnosticism. And so usually it's in that time period when the shift is made.
Why do you think they do that?
Well, I think what it is they're I think they're given some ideas and concepts that gets them to doubt what they believe, and it's a two-part thing. One of them is that people that are kind of brought up Christian their whole life. Again, it's a belief a lot of times held by the culture.
Yeah,
For example, if you're raised up in a Toyota family and everyone's like, Toyota's the best, and all right, I'm going to buy a Toyota, Dad. You do it because that's what the family does. And so sometimes what happens is, especially I think when you're young, you're raised with a certain set of values and beliefs. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying parents shouldn't do that. They absolutely should teach kids about the truth. But there comes a point when a person has to see the truth for themselves, and that truth has to take hold. Otherwise, you're just behaving according to what was ingrained in you by the culture, by your household. So you have to find out what is true for yourself. Not saying that
is truth for yourself. That's not the same as the truth. Right?
Correct. Like, in other words, you have to see the truth for yourself.
That works best for you? Or that is...
Well, for example, growing up, my father would say certain things about, do your work hard. When you were like young, he's like, don't worry about the girls right now. Work hard on your studies, do a good job, and, stay out of trouble, all these values. And when you're that young, it's like, well, I have to take what my dad says on faith because I haven't seen it for myself. Well, then as I got older, then I would see, the kids that didn't study as hard, the kids that were slacking off, didn't do as well once they got into the real world, and the kids that kind of put their nose to the grindstone did better. So all of a sudden you see it for yourself and you realize, oh, wow, what my dad was saying is true. So then it's faith then coupled with kind of seeing it for yourself. It becomes a living faith.